You will undoubtedly have arguments with people throughout your life, and in most cases you will end up being more frustrated than before without having resolved anything, but rather made things worse. However, there are ways to win arguments without arousing resentment or anger from the other person while getting your points across. So in this video, I will show you how you can win any argument, even against a girl. So the first and best lesson when it comes to arguments comes from good old Dale Carnegie in How to Win Friends and Influence People. He says there's only one way to get the best of an argument, and that's to avoid it. But I know you didn't come here to hear that, so let's get into what you should do when you're confronted and an argument is about to break out. So I want to start out with this story of Dave, the computer salesman, who acted the same way most of us would when people would talk bad about the brand of computers he was selling. He defended himself and the computers he was selling, and he won a lot of arguments and often said to himself, I really taught that man a lesson. He might have won a lot of arguments, but he was for sure losing in sales. However, after attending classes in dealing with people, he changed his approach. Now every time someone would downgrade his brand or say something like, X computer is no good, I wouldn't even take one if you gave it to me. I'm going to buy Y computer. He simply responded saying, Y are good computers and I'm sure you will be happy with it. They are made by a fine company and sold by fine people. That's it. He didn't add anything else but just ended it there. There can't be any more arguing here, and people would often be speechless after this. The people would then shift their energy from arguing into being more curious about X computer, and they would be able to express the good points with X computers. And needless to say, the sales increased and the customers had a more classy experience. You might be dead right with what you say as you poke holes in whoever you argue with, and your arguments might be flawless. But when it comes to changing the other person's mind, you're only giving yourself a disadvantage. You're basically trying to convince someone of your way of thinking by hurting what is of most importance to them, their pride. And even if your arguments are perfectly logical, they will not be able to reflect on them rationally simply because you've hurt their feelings. They will see right through your arguments and act straight out of emotions, and your logical arguments will have no effect. They're going to say fuck you, fuck logics, and then they're going to justify themselves even though they might be dead wrong. Because there's never someone's intention to be wrong, and in their own minds what they say makes perfect sense. And this is why you never bluntly should say you're wrong. It's a direct hit at their intelligence, pride, judgment and self-respect. And more harm than good will come out from this statement, and the other person will only defend their own way of thinking to an even greater extent. We're all defenders of our own pride, and we will even express our opinions completely opposite through the way people argue with us. Let me explain. If you bought a brand new phone, you will have spent a lot of money to get it, maybe even more than you're comfortable with. Now imagine someone asks you about the price, and upon hearing it they exclaim, "What? That's ridiculous. I can't believe you paid that much for a phone." What would you respond? They've dented your judgment, and you will most certainly justify your purchase. The best is eventually the cheapest, right? No one can expect top quality for bargain prices, eh? Now imagine the next day another person hears the price for the phone, exclaiming, "Wow, I wish I could afford something of that quality. It looks brilliant." Now your response this time? They have justified the purchase for you. You'll drop your guard, and to be honest, you might have paid a little too much to get it. And there are other similar phones you could get for a cheaper price. And your reaction is completely different based on the approach of the other person. And knowing that you're dealing with a person that will argue from an emotional standpoint rather than a logical one will be used to your advantage when entering an argument. I like the story of the art director who demanded perfection and often with very little time to execute on for the painters. The art director was always delighted in finding fault in every painting, and people would often leave his office in disgust due to his attack on their work. However, this time a painter named Ferdinand knew what to expect when showing his art to this director, and he anticipated that his art would be criticized. So after the initial criticism, instead of defending himself, he simply agreed and criticized himself even more. "Sir, if what you say is true, then I'm at fault here, and there's absolutely no excuse for my blunder. I've been doing paintings for you long enough to know better. I'm ashamed of myself. The director immediately started to defend Ferdinand, saying after all it's not that big of a deal, and before he had a chance to continue, Ferdinand interrupted him. Any mistake may be costly and they're all irritating. The director tried to break in, but Ferdinand wouldn't let him. He continued and said, I should have been more careful. You give me a lot of work and you really deserve the best, so I'm going to do this painting all over. This time the director felt forced to interrupt. No, I wouldn't want to put you through all that. He then resumed to praise the work and assured him that a minor change is all that would be needed. The art director ended up taking Ferdinand to lunch, giving him a check and another commission. So this just shows you the power of self-criticism and that you will win other people over by dropping your guard. So back to the argument now. So the first thing you should do is to distrust your own first instincts. Our first natural reaction when we disagree with someone is to be defensive. Instead, keep calm and control your temper, and then you want to listen. Don't say anything but listen, and do so genuinely and attentively while keeping yourself from interrupting. Try to build bridges of understanding rather than walls and barriers of misunderstanding. And once you've let the other person speak, address what you agree on. Let them know that you value their opinion and that you share many of their thoughts as well. Be honest and look for areas where you can admit errors, and be sure to let them know that. You will never get in trouble by admitting that you actually might be wrong. And this will stop the other person from arguing and instead inspire them to be as fair and as just as you are, and it will disarm their defensiveness. They will lower their guard and are now much more receptive for your logical arguments. You haven't hurt their pride or dented their judgment, but instead made them feel understood, and you've considered their expressions thoroughly. Now before you express your own opinions about the argument, start off with this very powerful sentence. Look, I thought otherwise, but I might be wrong here, which I frequently am. And if I'm wrong, I want you to correct me, so let's examine the facts. Saying this will completely take away their intentions of proving you wrong. And now you can calmly express your own opinions, and the other person are now willing to listen to what you've got to say. And this way of entering an argument will allow you to convince the other person of your way of thinking without arousing any anger or resentment. Arguments often start simply because they feel that you don't value them. The feeling of being important is one of the deepest urges humans have, so give them that feeling and try to honestly let them know that you understand them. It's a win-win situation, and you can apply this way of arguing even against a girl. And lastly, if you argue with a guy and still haven't convinced him, then a quick slap should do the trick. So there you have it, how to always walk away winning an argument. Most of these methods were taken from Dale Carnegie and his book How to Win Friends and Influence People. Leave a dislike if you thought it was shit. Maybe a little thumb up if you actually enjoyed it, yeah? Maybe even a little subscribe click, I know you've seen it. And I'll see you in the next one.
That's how you know you